Welcome to Fly on the Wall, a podcast where you have the opportunity to listen in on a live coaching conversation. Please make sure to like and subscribe. And now for today's episode.
Welcome to Fly on the Wall. Today we're talking with Pastor Phil Knauer from Baltimore, Maryland. We've got a great podcast for you today. We're talking about how to manage the expectations the congregation has on the pastor. Let's join the coaching conversation.
Man, it's good to see you, dude. How can I help you today, man? Let's jump into it.
Yeah, expectations. I wanted to just pick your brain on that. I've been in this weird kind of introspective space. I was on a coaching call with someone from my congregation who's our Celebrate Recovery leader, and he brought this quote to me that said, "Unrealistic expectations are premeditated resentments." And he was asking me, how do I, the pastor, create appropriate and healthy congregational expectations of me, and then what expectations do I have, spoken or unspoken, for the congregation? And so, I've been a pastor 23 years. I don't know that I've ever thought about it as deeply as I did in that moment. So I wanted to pick your brain. I guess what I'm finding is that yes, we have a constitution and bylaws at our church that spells out, here's what the pastor does and what they're responsible for, which is also my de facto job description. Probably 99% of our people aren't really aware of what that is. And I'm finding that probably most of our people have a very customized expectation of me, their pastor. And then I probably also have some expectations of the people. And I wanted to pick your brain, Chris, when it comes for me with the relationship I have with my congregation, first of all, what should they appropriately and realistically expect of me, their pastor? And then, what should I appropriately and realistically expect of them? And of course, there's follow-up questions to that. Does that change with size? Did that change with the size of the staff? What happens when either party has unrealistic or unfair expectations? How do you bring that together? I mean, you've pastored everything from church plant to multi-site to big and small churches. Maybe you could just help me and help us think through that a little bit. I think usually I only find out what people expect of me when I don't check one of their boxes, right? I find out by stepping on a landmine, and I didn't do something they did expect of me, or I did do something that they didn't expect from me. And that's sometimes the only time I find it out. And that does lead to just some bumpiness every now and again. Can you maybe help us clean some of that up?
Yeah, I love that question. I think that's such a great question because, I agree with your friend and the statement he made, but it's where frustration comes from. It's from unmet and unrealistic expectations, or unmet expectations. Both, I think, could be synonymous to some degree, but they're unrealistic, but they're also unmet because they're unrealistic. And now that creates an enormous amount of frustration. Unmet expectations always leads to frustration. So knowing that, I think, is important. And I love what they said. I agree with that 100%. A couple of thoughts that I have. One is in no particular order, I do think they change as the congregation gets bigger. As the church grows, it has to change. It's not realistic anymore. What is expected and what people want, or what you're able to give, and what they're, maybe what they're able to give might not change as much as what you're able to give, because their role doesn't change whether the church is 100 or the church is 2,000. Their role is still the same-ish. Yours is the one that really changes. The one fact that you need to always understand is that by nature, the majority of people will view the church in the size in which they first came. So as the church grows, they still view it as this, and now it's this. And so their expectations are here when it's not realistic anymore. So I think there's a realization to that. I heard a guy recently say, in some survey, some survey was done on what people expect from their pastor. 16 different things were identified, and some biblical guy or whatever, scholar, whatever, took those 16 things and said, they're actually everything Jesus did. So what we do is we say, here's the resume of Jesus, live up to that, which none of us ever will, but it's a funny way of saying they actually want us to live up to an expectation that's not realistic inside of our human skin. Yeah. And so whatever those 16 things are, I don't know, but I heard a guy say it, and a few weeks ago, and I could not stop laughing. I was like, so true. Here's the resume of Jesus. Live up to this, Phil. I think one of the things I think is really important, and I heard a guy, I was speaking at, where was I at? I think I was speaking at an ARC conference or something a few years back, and we were in the green room, and I was chatting with this lead pastor of a large church. He did something I thought was genius. In his version of membership, people don't, membership, a lot of people don't do that anymore. Partnership, whatever you want to call the ownership, whatever they call that version. In that class, in that setting, what he does is, it's pretty interesting. He does this very unique thing. He literally talks straight up what you can and cannot expect from me. And straight up. But he starts it off, and I'm not saying to do this, but he starts it off in a unique way. He has everybody, let's say there's 25 people there. He has them all write down on a piece of paper, what are the 1 or 2 or 3 things you're expecting from me? That's pretty unique. Then someone gets those while they're doing something else, kind of compiles them into a list of 10. And then he uses that as a launching pad to say, okay, here's the top 10 that came in. Okay, all of these are realistic except for number 6 and 8. Not going to happen. So now let's go to page 5. Page 5, I'll show you exactly what you can expect from me and exactly what you should not expect from me. And I just thought, I don't know if I've had anybody ever in all my ministry life ever say that they're that blunt with people joining their church, whatever that means in everybody's context. They're that blunt on what you can and cannot and should not expect from me. When I heard that for the first time, Phil, I thought, that's interesting, that's odd, but I also think it's genius. Just say it. Because it's a lot easier to divorce before you get married. Yeah. So, if they're expecting you to be something that you can't be, let's just get it out in the open now. So he has them fill out the piece of paper, they compile it, then he actually goes to a piece of paper in their little packet, shows them what he can and cannot expect. Then I love this part. And he goes, okay, so we're all clear. Because I don't want to frustrate. Yeah, everybody's clear. He goes, they all love it. They love the exercise, he told me. He goes, then we flip the page and say, now what do I expect of you? And then he says, once you let them voice it, once you get that clear, once they're like, this is so cool, no one's ever done this before. He goes, then they're ready and primed for you to go, okay, here's what I expect from you. And I love that. And I think, yes, clear expectations, and yes, to voice them. Get what those are, whatever those are, and yes, they will change. As you grow, I think that packet changes, So
do you think, so let's use this pastor in your hypothetical as an example. So yeah, he's being clear and he's saying up front, this is what you can expect, this is unrealistic. What we haven't talked about though is there a right or a wrong grade you can put on any of the things that he shares? In other words, is this such a unique church to church, uniquely customizable thing? Or are there any among that absolutes that any pastor worth their salt should say, my congregation should absolutely, regardless our size, expect the following of me? And then I, the pastor, absolutely of my congregation, regardless of, is there anything evergreen here? Or is this all pretty much person to person, church to church? Because there could also be a situation where the people expect too little of me, or I expect too little of myself. And, how would you speak to that?
That's a great question. I would say, I would say, my personal opinion is, and based on just all the coaching and whatnot, I feel that they're expect and not expect, or, that the expect and not expect boundaries or whatever. I do think there are some similarities. What should they expect from me? Integrity. What should they expect from me? To lovingly tell the truth. What should they expect from me? I mean, I'm just kind of going down. I don't know if there's any pastor in America where I'm like, no, I don't think integrity should matter for you, or I don't think lovingly tell the truth should matter to you. I think it should matter to all of us. Whatever, you can come up with that list. I think all of us should be that. I think there are some things that pastors are afraid to say, where it's like, here's another one. Let me be very clear. I will not be at every hospital visit.
Right.
Do it. I can't be at every funeral, and I can't do every wedding. And so if you really want me to do it and I can't do it, I just need to tell you now, rather than your feelings getting hurt. So those, I think it's easy to say things like the integrity thing, or the, telling the truth in love, or, whatever, preaching, using the word as the source of everything, or whatever thing. Like, those are pretty black and white. But then, and no one has a problem saying those. Like, no one's got a problem saying that in their version of membership. But now you start getting into hospital, weddings, funerals. People aren't so gutsy to say that as pastors.
No.
But you should. There's no way I can be there. If it's a fight between my family's going to win or you, my family's going to win. Ooh, that's like just letting you know they're going to win. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't ever do anything, but I can tell you this much: if my kid's sick and you're in the hospital, my kid's getting my attention. Now, someone's going to come visit you from the church, but it just may not be me. Like, those are some interesting things to do. And I've done portions of what I'm talking about here. I got to tell you, Phil, people respect it. They respect the honesty, and they get it when you talk to them about it. What they don't get is the action without the explanation.
That's good too.
So tell them the explanation before the action happens. What we do is we do the action and then try to explain it. How about explain it and then do the action?
Makes sense. Yeah.
And those are, yeah. Anyway, so
the group that you identified in the scenario is, you talk to people in your newcomers class or your membership class, you're talking to folks who haven't been there for a good minute. And
right.
Like you said earlier, they don't have a preconceived explanation. They're coming in exactly under those expectations, and they might have an easier time because you're communicating, you're not supplanting some existing
right.
expectation. What are some ways that, as your churches grew and as what the expectations you could deliver on and the way you had to budget your time changed, how were you able to, maybe win over is not the best term, but people who were there who actually had to make some concessions or adjustments to their expectations of you? I can't always, when you're running 10, I'm going to be in the hospital with you. I'm going to, at a couple hundred people, I might not be the one to notice if you were missing for a week. I can't. How were you able to win over some of those people? I think that's one of the challenges I have is the folks who have been here for some time as we grow, and I can't be measured by the same scorecard. I don't have the capacity
right.
to do the same thing, even though we want to make sure those needs are met
right.
within the body and maybe by other pastors. Is there a way to win them on, or do they eventually migrate out to a church more of the size that can meet the expectations that they have as the pastor? What have you seen there?
Yeah, that's great. So what I'm hearing you saying, I think that's you bringing it up. Bottom line is, we're setting new yard markers, and that's easy to do for people that are new. They're like, okay, well, that's what it looks like on the field.
Right.
This group over here is like, well, wait a minute, I've been here for 6-7 years, and now you're changing the yard markers on me.
Yeah.
Me personally, I would suggest that anybody that is facing that or thinking about that, I think this expectation is a great conversation. I think clarity of expectations is great. How do you do it for people that have been there for a while? Here's the way that I would suggest do it. I would say reverse engineer the entire thing. So what I mean by that is create the expectation, create your list, create how it's going to look and all that. Then for your class, and then the membership class, or whatever you call your membership, and then reverse engineer it. Now, what I mean by that is, okay, now you go to your board and you start from the top down. So you reverse engineer it because you're going to start with the end in mind. Then you're going to go to the top. Okay, board, I'm about to present this. I'm not asking your approval that I present this, but I'm presenting this because these new people will accept it easy. You're a board, and you've been around for X amount of years. It might be a little more difficult for you, but I want you to see what I'm going to be teaching them, because us that have been here for a long time, we need to realize this is what's being taught, and we do need to adjust it. I think it's a family meeting feel to the board. Then boom, you move down to your leaders and your volunteers. Bring them out on a night, do your regular dream night or whatever you guys do, and bring them in and just say, hey, I need to give it out to everybody. This is what we're going to start doing and the reason I'm sharing this with you is because I know I'm changing the yard markers. I know that. And I know it's like, wait a minute, we've been used to it being for the last 6 years. Most of you are fine. Nobody has an attitude, but I can't introduce something to new people without the older people, not old in age, but although people that have been around it for a long time, without you guys knowing about it. That wouldn't be right. So I can't teach them something that I'm not willing to teach you. So I'm teaching you what I'm going to be teaching them. I think that family conversation is acceptable. And I think people will adjust.
Awesome. I like that about using the language of changing the yard markers. And we're aware that for those of you that have been on the field, you're used to the yard markers being where they are. And we don't want you to wake up one day and be surprised, so you're leading with the explanation, like you said earlier.
Yeah. And I also think, just tag that in there, like the yard marker thing. I think people enjoy the transparency and the defining what is real, not dancing around it. Just like, let me be straight up. I'm changing the yard markers from what you're used to. People just like that rather than,
I think it models leadership principles that they can use at home as parents. They can use it on the workplace, because most of us at some point have to change yard markers.
Right.
With kids, with employees, with coworkers. There's just times when the old expectations just have to be revised and revisited. And so I think the church can model that for individuals, just with transparency and honesty.
I would do it for sure.
One last, if we have time, would I have one last
follow-up? One more.
Let's say you're in a church that is growing, and let's go back to your examples of the model where the pastor, the main guy or gal, is weddings, funerals, all the high touch personal. When you're sick, we're there. How do you help your congregation to receive that same kind of ministry, if it does, even though it is not coming from that one pastor? Another person in your circle or in your life group is ministering to those needs. Another person is ministering those needs, even though it's not the pastor. Sometimes the pastor still doesn't get credit for that, if that makes sense. In other words, you're the pastor, you should be there. Forget about the other 10 people who were there. You were there. How can you help people from the church be willing to maybe say, eat from a different chef, as long as their stomach is still being filled, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Because I think to grow, you don't want to sacrifice any of these things. You don't want the pastor to get up and say, hey, weddings are unimportant and hospital visitation doesn't mean everything. What we're trying to do is equip other people within the body to be able to meet the needs of more people. But how do you, for those people who are just like, that should only be the pastor, I can only eat from that person. How do you help with that?
Well, again, I think that anytime you're shifting culture, culture always goes top down, in, out. It always does that. So top down being it always starts at the top and flows its way down. In, out being it starts at the center of the church and moves its way out. So this is a culture change for you. That's really what you're changing. You're asking for a culture shift. So you got to go top down, in, out. So top down and out is, I got to get the board and I got to get the leaders to see this. Then I got to move from the board to the leaders to the volunteers. And then once you go board, leader, volunteers, and then you're just teaching it on your regular version of membership, you're fine. But I think you do it in family discussions, and you talk about things like the body of Christ, Paul raising up Timothy. The eye doesn't say to the ear, eye, or foot or hand or whatever, I don't need you. All that. You bring all that in and have the teaching moment that, guys, we're going to have to be people that can accept the teaching, the encouragement, the visit, whatever it is, from someone else, or otherwise we're failing at the body of Christ. We're failing at the body of Christ. And this is maturity, when we understand and appreciate the other person's gift and how much we need each other. Wow. If we do not do that, we're failing. And so again, back to the expectation thing, start at the top and work your way down. And I would include that in that conversation of expectations. I would include the conversation of, here's what we're teaching in the new membership or whatever the version is, or what you want to call it, that we're teaching this expectation, and here's what it looks like, and here's what I expect from them, and here's what they should expect from me. But also, I would put a third expectation.
Okay.
I'm just thinking out loud, literally just came to me, just thinking out loud here. So what do you expect from me? What do I expect from you? What should you expect from each other?
That's good. Yep.
There's that third. Now that just becomes an expectation conversation. It's not a second subject. You got to accept someone going to visit you in the hospital. Don't create it as a separate subject. Create it as 3 levels or 3, whatever pillars.
You cannot have a lesson with only 2 points as a pastor.
No, there's no way. And if you
So
can get
there's
them
the
all to
third.
start with the same letter, that would definitely really hit home. But I think if you do that, it doesn't create 2 separate subjects.
No.
It creates 1 subject.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to go, oh, what we should expect from you. Yeah. What you should expect from us. Yeah, that makes sense. I would do it in that order, because once you get what they expect from you, that's all they care about anyway. Then you go to the second one. What do you expect from them? And then what we expect from each other. Then you just do the body of Christ, the whole eye, foot, hand thing. That's all I would do there. And I think really it's an expectation conversation is really what it is. And that's all you're having with the board, the leaders, the volunteers.
Love it.
But I love that you brought that up. I think that's a powerful, powerful subject for this podcast. It's been a great podcast because, man, how many conversations do we have of people left the church, not just your church, just a buddy of yours in whatever state, someone left the church because they were upset about blank, or the pastor's frustrated with the people about blank, or they're frustrated with their leaders. When it's all said and done, the expectations haven't been drawn out.
Right.
So draw them out. And if you draw them out, you might save yourself a lot of heartache.
Absolutely. Yeah. Whenever I just have found kind of the common thread is whenever I bump into somebody in my ministry that's either disappointed or they're dealing with some resentment, 99 times out of 100, there was an unmet expectation somewhere. They just expected something to go in a way that it didn't from somebody, and that the lingering result is that. So this is super helpful. Yeah. In
James 1, I won't quote it right, but in James 1, he says, where do all your struggles and arguments come from, and quarrels come from? They come from the desire within. You want something, and I think in the message says,
not get it. Yeah, that's James 4. That's right. Yeah.
And what is that? That's just really, it's just Paul's, or it's just talking about in James. It's you have an expectation, it's not being met. Period. And once those expectations are clearly defined, just get them out in the open. It'll save yourself.
Absolutely.
But dude, this has been a great podcast. Thanks for being on. And as always, dude, I'm here to serve you and love hanging out with you.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Chris.
All right, dude. Have an awesome day, buddy. We'll see you, man.
Too. All right.
Thanks for stopping by today. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and to be on the lookout for more podcasts from Fly on the Wall. See you next time.